Welcome to the Chicago Bears Podcast, a presentation of ESPN Chicago, Chicago's home for sports. Here's your host, Pat, the designer.
Bears fans, welcome into another edition of the Chicago Bears Podcast. Pat the designer, Courtney, Cronin. We're still reacting to what we saw from joint practice yesterday, and we got to look ahead to what we're going to see tonight. Courtney, how you doing? How do you like these evening practices out there?
It's a nice change of pace. I know that you get so used to going 10 a.m. every day. You're done with practice about 2 hours into like the hottest part of the day at noon. Now it's, the evening time. It changes up routines for players. It changes up our routine, which is, you've got like 6 hours to kill from the time that we're recording this podcast to the time that we go out to watch practice. And Indy does it right, man. So when I was an intern in 2011, I interned for the Fox station in Indianapolis. Camp was up in Anderson, Indiana, so not where we're at right now in Westfield. And I remember being out there and just like how cool the feel was, where they had the stands for the fans to be out there, and it had that like true camp vibe. They've ramped it up like times 100 with what they have in Westfield. It's a really neat, compact, but really good. Like everybody's got a good vantage point. You can see both fields really clearly. And it honestly has that training camp vibe that I don't normally get at Hallis Hall. And maybe that's because we go to the same facility every day during the season, and we're there during training camp. But the couple times as a kid that I went to Bourbonnais, it felt more like what we're working with in Westfield right now than what I go to every day here and what I went to every day when I was covering the Vikings, when they were at their facility. So it's neat. Like it's a true camp vibe. And I know this is, the last official week of training camp. So it's nice that you get to cap things off that way.
Well, love to hear that. I mean, it's good to hear that they've got the facilities right. Mm-hmm. Now the question is our team playing right in said facilities?
First quarter.
Let's get it started off here in the first quarter, Courtney. Very similar to yesterday, right? Like I said, the reaction to what you saw from Justin Fields. What were your thoughts on how that first team offense looked out there versus a different defense, not the same guys, who apparently aren't afraid to hit him during practice, which is kind of irritating. I don't like hearing that.
I think that might have been overblown. And when we talked with Cole Kmet about it yesterday, like what was your perspective on it? Like, I think somebody might have fallen and it got Fields' ankle wrapped up or just something. It wasn't malicious in intent. I actually think the Bears were doing more chirping on defense and, laying down the boomstick a little bit. I mean, we know that Eddie Jackson hit. Like, I was watching it clearly and, he went airborne. I mean, that's who he is, though. He's a ball-hawking safety. That's the version of himself that, Bears fans wanted to see him get back to. Hopefully he'll be practicing tonight. We saw him leave the field, but I thought the Bears in all honesty on defense kind of brought that energy that the Colts had to match. But when it comes to Fields and the first team offense, there were some moments that were good. I mean, I go back to individuals. There was a play where DJ Moore shook Kenny Moore is it Kenny Clark or Kenny Moore? I'm losing my train of thought right now. It's the they're a really good cornerback for the Colts. Yeah. Shakes him in the middle of the field. It's like a route running clinic. It was just incredible to watch. And then he tracks towards the sideline and makes a one-handed catch to finish inbounds. And it's just watching that connection where Fields knows that he doesn't have to be that's the one guy he doesn't have to be pinpoint perfect precision and accuracy on. Yet it feels like every time he is, and DJ Moore makes every catch look really, like a perfect catch, but it makes every ball look like a perfectly thrown ball. But I mean, there were takeaways like that were good, but there were also from the first team offense some moments during the 2-minute drill where they stalled on fourth down on their second attempt when Fields was flushed out of the pocket, tries to throw on the run to hit Darnell Mooney, and it's a pass broken up. But then you go to the 2-minute drill before that one for the first team offense. It was the end of the move the ball period in 11-on-11. and Justin bounces back from like a couple, I called them nothing plays because it was like a run from Herbert and it was like, I think a screen pass that went nowhere. And then he hits DJ Moore over the middle of the field, which from my vantage point might have been a busted coverage, but still, like, you take those chances over the middle field where you can get them. And then this deep ball that he unleashed to Velus Jones inside the 5-yard line was great for Justin, but also great to see Velus make that catch and haul that thing in. That was his second deep ball. So he had one earlier with the second team offense that he caught from PJ Walker. And I was like, all right, this is a good bounce back practice. It was a big practice for Velus Jones after the preseason game against Tennessee where he muffed the punt. And, he's on, if there's a hot seat for players, he's on it because we're trying to figure out, the coaching staff too, as us media people are trying to decipher what his role is going to be. How do you fit? Can you actually be more of a piece on this offense and utilize your speed to be that deep threat that we thought he was going to develop into when they drafted him? So to watch him get those reps with the first team offense and make the most of it on a drive that started out a little shaky but finished really well, I thought that was some encouraging signs. But there were moments last night where it felt like some of the ups and downs, it felt more downs than ups for Justin Fields. But again, this is the first time they're going against another defense that's not theirs in practice. So you do get that extended period of time to see another pass rush, which right now does not have DeForest Buckner because he has that foot injury. So it's a weaker pass rush in theory, at least on paper. There's no unique Ngakoue in that pass rush. He's on the Bears. So they still struggled against it. That's what I'm trying to say. So I feel like there were moments that, were good, but obviously the ups and downs at this point are still to be expected with this unit.
And here's my question for you, right? Does it feel like in-game moments, right? Where in a game, listen, you're not going to complete every pass going down the field. You're not going to sit there and just dice up a defense every single play. There's going to be moments where you do, moments where you kill them. Does it feel like that, where it's like, yeah, you had like you said, a couple of nothing plays, but then you're able to make a play that in game ends up getting you a first down, keeps the chains moving? Or does it feel like Justin Fields is actually struggling? Because some people are making it seem like, Justin Fields had a horrible day. He looked bad. He wasn't able to complete passes downfield. And, every now and then he got one to go through.
Yeah. I mean, it's still, the ups and downs are still there. There's no taking away from what you see, that there are some good moments. And there's also some moments where it feels like, okay, they're still trying to grow past a couple problem areas that, that showed up a lot last year. But so after that scuffle happened between the offensive line of the Bears and the defensive line of the Colts, that was after the play to Velus Jones, and I felt like that really fired up the unit. And I think it's something that you just try to track happening in these joint practices. But I almost felt like it was okay, it was protect your quarterback, all that, but also kind of getting the energy out of, look, we got back on track. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I saw it as not just, we got to protect the quarterback. Nobody hits our quarterback. I get that. But there's this pressure on this unit to have to get it right and to have to put it together where you're completing drives in the 2-minute drill and not stalling the way that they did at the end. And that you're making Justin look good, and you're hoping that Justin can stay in the pocket, can be back there with, and not tuck and run. There were a couple moments early on in 11-on-11 where there's an overthrow to Mooney, which was a bad ball. And he went like this, he hit his elbow. I didn't see the angle of his elbow getting hit, but it's all right, well, was there something mechanically you were doing wrong there with the angle of the throw that could have been changed? And then there was a pass before that was tipped by Equinemius St. Brown into the hands of a safety. And it's all right, well, what happened on that one? So there's still those moments, and that's going to happen during training camp. And I don't honestly think, Pat, that those are going to ever go away, because these are still new plays. You're still trying to get the timing down with your receivers, and you're going against a defense that's going to be a little bit more willing to go after you. Your defense won't, because of it, just the nature of it being a joint practice and another team. But I don't feel any different about this offense, and that's not a bad thing. I still feel like they're in the growing process, and I think what you hope to see, and we'll hear from Matt Eberflus tonight, and hopefully there's the plan, or at least comes out, like, is he going to play? Is he not going to play? Sounds like when I asked him on Monday that he will play in this season game. It's just a matter of 2 series, 1 series, 3 series, who knows? He needs these reps. I think that's my biggest conclusion. I don't care what anybody says about the preseason. Justin Fields in this offense needs these reps. They need them in the joint practices, and he needs them in these games. They're bar none. He needs these reps, and I think that the Bears know that too.
Yeah, and it's funny, right? Because they end up dropping the 1920 drive today, and check that out on YouTube as well on the Chicago Bears YouTube channel page. But you hear them talking about the importance of the offense. This entire episode was built around the offense, and so you hear them talking about, right, like, our mindset needs to be, this is perfect first time. We're going through and we're getting this done. And we have so many reps involved in this, like you said, with the preseason, right? We have so many reps already in place that it's natural to us. And that was one of my main takeaways, that, Coach Flus isn't shying away from the fact that there's a long way to go here. Mm-hmm. And he's putting his players in a position to go out there and have every opportunity to say, no, we've done that before. We've seen this situation. And I feel like, right, like going up against a different defense, that's why I think, I asked J-Mac yesterday, and I asked Lance Briggs earlier this week, how important are these joint practices? It seems like you're getting more out of this than you get out of the actual game. And you get these moments like we're talking about today where, Justin gets to go through his ups and downs.
Yeah. And you have to be able to go through those, because not everything's going to be perfect. And of course, what we see in these training camp practices are a lot of do-overs. Like especially back at Hallis Hall, because Matt Eberflus is the one who's determining what's a sack, what's not. And of course, there were a couple sacks in there last night, and that's going to happen because, it happened for Anthony Richardson too. But those do-overs and those situational things that they just keep harping on, you're not going to get a do-over in a real game. And that's why you have practice to be able to key in on those things.
Yeah.
And I'll just say this, because this is yesterday's practice 15, I want to say. So today's practice 16. JJ Watt had a tweet out last night I need everybody to pay attention to, because it was talking about, how people be tweeting about one-on-one reps. No, this guy won the rep, and all those things. I'm going to read you this tweet because it just was so perfect. It says, quote, love seeing footage from NFL training camps, but can't stand accounts posting videos of one rep from 1v1s and making outlandish statements. A, 1v1s are for working on your craft and new moves. B, literally every player wins and loses reps every single day. One rep tells nothing. I need to drill that point home, to infinity, because that's what we see every day out there. And I know we were talking about Fields, and this kind of extends to, wow, he hit 7 guys in a row during one-on-ones. Yeah, because look at the cushion the DBs are giving them. That doesn't tell you anything. And I feel like there's something with that too when it goes to the offensive line, defensive line reps. Wow, this, Jatari Carter in place of Nate Davis, man, he was really doing this or he was doing that. You can't you can tell strength versus strength, head up, yes. But those are moments for pass rushers, like a Jervon Dexter, who's been working with Unique Ngakoue, to try that swim, to try that cross chop, to try all of those things that maybe he doesn't have in his repertoire. And everyone's doing it on every single team. So I just feel like, we're 3 weeks into this, 15 practices down. It is what it is at this point, and it's not that you can't take anything away from it, but the overreaction, I feel like in certain elements, just kind of needs to be put to bed right now, because there's still going to, even 4 weeks from now, there's still going to be some bad days from the Bears offense. I promise you. And that's going to be in games when it really matters. Did they do enough situationally this summer to hone in on, hey, if this goes wrong, this is our fail safe. If Fields is having, if Fields can't get the deep ball going and he's trying to find DJ Moore and the routes are not forming downfield, what is his fail safe? Is the running back there in the flat? Is it Roschon Johnson? Is it Deontay Foreman? Is it Khalil Herbert? Whoever the hell it is. Finding those things, that's what you use these 6 weeks of camp that you have for, not having a polished product by the time that it's over, especially for a team that's in phase 2 of this rebuild. It's not going to look pretty every single day, especially against another team.
Yeah, and I think that's the point, right, where it's why I look at the 11 on 11s. It's why I look at the ups and downs, and I say that's how NFL games go.
Mhm.
And my biggest thing is, how's Justin Fields bounce back from it? How does the first team offense bounce back from it? Heck, we talked about Velus Jones a little bit. How does Velus Jones even bounce back in those situations where, guess what? Your back's up against the wall. You have to take an opportunity. And I think we're actually seeing that on offense and defense. That's something we haven't seen before from Chicago Bears teams. Remember, with Mitch, it was just a lot of bad days compounded with bad days. We would come out of camp and we'd be like, yeah, he hit Allen Robinson over the middle, but the offense didn't look much better. I can't tell you the amount of days listening to ESPN 1000 where JD would come in and be like, guys, it is what it is.
Yeah. That's where we were last year at this time. It's like, all right, like kind of grin and bear it if you're a member of this team, because it's probably going to get worse before it gets better. You can easily say, if you've watched one training camp practice, if you watched, all of them, that it's not where it was last year. And that's obviously like the very bare minimum, but that's a very encouraging sign that Fields is showing that growth. But, seeing him against this team today, I'm curious to see when we do, whatever the situation period is, because that was the same for both teams last night. The offense was down by 4. It was 112 or 121 left on the clock, no timeouts. And to watch the offense, he gets flushed out of the pocket and he's trying to do what he did last year, which is make those plays on the run. It's just that it was the ball wasn't a well thrown ball, and it was a well covered play. Like, those things are going to happen in games. How do you rebound from that when it is a do or die situation at the end of games to go win it? And they practice that a lot. So some days you win those, some days you don't.
Yeah, well, we'll see. We'll see. Hopefully we get more wins than losses. That's all you're trying to compound together. Let's keep this thing moving along, though, as we head here into the second quarter. Do want to let you guys know the second quarter is brought to you by the Hard Rock Casino in Northern Indiana. See Gypsy Kings featuring Nicole Reyes on September 29th at Hard Rock Live. Tickets on sale now at Ticketmaster.com. Courtney, we focused a ton in on the offense here, but a real question that I think a lot of Bears fans have: what did we see from the defense? We heard that they were laying the boom. We heard that they were chirping. We heard that they were doing all the things they were doing versus the Bears offense, but now versus this Colts offense. But we also heard that young Anthony Richardson might not be as far behind the 8 ball as a lot of people think.
He had a really good practice yesterday. I came away impressed, and this is my first time seeing him up close. I didn't see him in any games at Florida. I mean, obviously I watched them on TV, and you got such a mixed bag where, they start out the year, he beats Utah and then he falls off a cliff. And right. I think that it's okay to have that belief, hey, this guy might be a project this year, but also still understand why the Colts are doing what they're doing and making it clear. They did this for a number of reasons. You don't let him go this whole week taking the first team reps and still have like either or on the depth chart between himself and Gardner Minshew. There's too much speculation. Like, nip it in the bud, name him the starter, and start tailoring everything you're doing to him offensively. That's how he's going to grow, and they have to get this right. There's a lot of pressure on this front office. For the last 5 years, it's been a lot of bad at the quarterback position in Indianapolis, and they've gotten it wrong. So I think to see the promise, and God, he can throw a strike. I mean, some of those throws were darts yesterday when he's, looking towards the sideline, finds Michael Pittman, finds Alec Pierce. Like, he's got a really strong arm, and that athleticism, like his relative athletic score. We were talking about this last night. It was higher than Cam Newton's, and Cam had one of the highest ones coming out of college, but I think it was the highest ever for a quarterback. And you see that in real time. The guy is a freak of nature in terms of the physical build and also what he can do with his arm. But the Bears defense, missing a couple pieces, but also getting a couple pieces back. Like DeMarcus Walker, when we were talking with Alan Williams about him yesterday, he said that he didn't really have like too much of an eye on him, but he felt, he saw him an individual and he feels like he's ready to go. Yannick Ngakoue is clearly up to speed. It's just like, when are they going to want to unleash him at all in the preseason? I mean, you'll see it, but it's not, I doubt he'll play. I really do, because Flus was kind of hedging on that earlier in the week. Guys 6-7 years in, it's a different case versus a young player like a Justin Fields. But I think the Bears defense yesterday, I came away impressed with the secondary. I really did. And they're missing pieces right now because Eddie Jackson had to go out yesterday. Jaquan Brisker is doing a lot of trash talking from the sideline, not in the game. I can tell that he's really chomping at the bit to get back out there.
Yeah.
But they were good in coverage yesterday. And I think even just like the semblance of what a shell of a pass rush looks like now when it was going against their own offense, that's what I'm going to be zeroing in on, because I remember asking Kyler Gordon about it yesterday. You've, had this improved pass rush now throughout camp. Can you tell that it's making your job easier? And he said, yes, like it's going to help them on the back end because the quarterback's going to have to get the ball out. And some of the throws that Anthony Richardson made, there was an overthrow that Eddie Jackson picked off. I think that one was, it was in 7-on-7. I caught that one. And then of course the big hit that he had on Michael Pittman later. There's a physical edge on this defense that I feel like they want to play with that might not have existed last year.
Did we get any update on Eddie at all? I know he didn't leave the sidelines. I know they're also not going to tell, is he going to play or not? But like, any update on Eddie, or did you see anything that made it seem like he was going to be out for a little bit of time?
So I watched that play happen, and then I'm following him on the sideline with my binoculars, and he looked like he was he looked like he was shaken up. Like there were moments he's kind of like, gosh, like you could just tell like a guy like, man, that like stings, or like just trying to shake off the pain. But he didn't go into a medical tent. He was supposed to talk to us last night, but that was a late switch to Roschon Johnson. So they don't typically let injured players talk. So you might infer that he might not have been feeling his best after that. But Alan Williams did say that, until he's told otherwise, and he wasn't told anything immediately with Eddie Jackson. I mean, it was a heavy hit and you could hear it. And that's just like the only thing you'd be worried about, like from something like that, would be lingering effects, potentially concussion related symptoms. You hope he doesn't have anything like that, but we'll see tonight. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, they've been cautious with Eddie. Remember, like he had the Liz Frank injury and they brought him along at a pace they thought was very intentional and smart this offseason. But I would not be surprised, like if there's any sort of risk, if they feel like he might have, and we won't know if he had a concussion or not. I mean, Flus will talk tonight, but then we can ask him. But if Eddie Jackson's not out there, I imagine it's something that like they're just like, we need to play this a little bit safer. Like the hit you took last night, we can't afford to have you get another one. But we'll see because he didn't go back in after that. I didn't expect him to.
What's protocol for concussion in practice? They don't have to check. Do they have to check you right away if they think you've got concussion symptoms? Or
so he didn't go. There was no medical tent for him to go into, or at least he didn't go to one. So like it could have just been, it was a really hard hit. I got the wind knocked out of me. Let me shake this thing off. Or it could be that they evaluated him for a concussion afterwards. We haven't heard anything yet, but I did not see him get any sort of medical attention on the sideline when I was there.
Outside of Eddie Jackson laying the boom, was there anybody who stood out to you on the defensive end of things that, you came away like, okay, we might have something there as well?
I mean, if we're getting in that physical edge, trash talk, all that stuff. I mean, Tyreek Stevenson, I wrote about him earlier this week. I think he's come a long way. And we knew that he was going to be good because he's a second-round pick. They traded up for this guy because they didn't think he was going to be there at 61, so they move up to 56. And it's also a matter of Terrell Smith's on ice. He's hurt. So I think that this is a really strong opportunity for a player who had some self-admitted slip-ups in his technique and in, just being a rookie. He's really taking the bull by the horns here and trying to make a strong push that would leave the coaches to not consider anybody other than him for that CB2 job. And he's done a really good job of that. He tracked down the gunner on punt yesterday, and he laid a pretty big hit on, I think it's Tony Brown, who's the gunner for the Colts. It's funny watching him. And I know that there is that line that they don't want to cross where it's the extra stuff after the whistle. And Alan Williams will be the first one who won't stand for any of that. Because we'll ask him, well, is it, do you want him to pull it back? Do you have to teach him about things? We want to let players show their personality, but there is that fine line that you don't want to cross. He hasn't crossed it yet. But I think with a rookie and somebody with a position that you have to play with that swagger and cockiness, you don't want it to trend into an area where it's like costing your team if you get penalties, anything like that. Because the first time you get one of those, like that takes away the S in HITS principles, which is playing smart. So
100%.
they won't stand for that. But I mean, gosh, like it's been all over the defense. He's super active. I think this really helps what Kyler Gordon is going to be this year for the Bears. It's a good sign that they landed this cornerback pick. And it feels like they really like got it right with Tyreek Stevenson. That was probably my other big takeaway from yesterday.
As we get ready to keep this thing moving along, favorite part of the show, the halftime segment, because there's always something fun at halftime. We can talk about anything during halftime. And Courtney, got to ask you, what are you doing down there? It's Indianapolis. Is there something that's going on over the next 6 hours that you've got planned? Like, that's the spot.
It's actually, okay, so I lived here. So I went to IU for college. I, spent 4 years in Bloomington, spent a lot of time in Indianapolis. And then I lived in Indy for 10 months out of college when I interned at the NCAA. So coming here for me is always like coming home to a degree. I have a lot of people that still live in this area. And my day has oddly been like packed with, this is for a beat writer. It's kind of like peeling back the curtain. When you have these road trips and you have time to kill, it's not like there really aren't as many hours as you think. So like, I'm working ahead on some features. I'm, making calls for interviews, checking in on some things, and the time really goes quickly. And so I have, once you and I finish this, a friend of mine is a journalism teacher at a high school in Brownsburg, Indiana. So I'm going to go speak to his students. And then, by the time like all of that's done, it's going to be time to go back to practice. So we went to a cool brewery last night after practice. That is the nice thing about being done, 9:00, like you can kind of, you're not ready to go home at that point. And Indy's a fun place. Like, I mean, we're not downtown, so it's not the usual combine shenanigans, but we're out in Carmel. So it's a little slower pace up here, but it's fun. And it's it's just like, it's kind of a nice, for us too, a nice change of pace from like the day-to-day grind of being up at Hallis from, 9 till about 4 every day and then going home. And I like it. Like, this is my second, I'm trying to think, this is my third joint practice. So I covered one with the 49ers back in 16 or 17. I covered one with Minnesota when George Payton took that job to become their GM. He was the assistant GM in Minnesota. Then he went to the Broncos. And then this is my third one. Haven't seen any crazy fights. I mean, I've heard the stories, and I just feel like maybe we're due for one. You obviously don't want to, I mean, that becomes like chaotic when stuff like that happens. You don't want guys to get hurt, but we've seen some pretty epic fights over the years. So like, I feel like you always are prepared for that with joint practices, but I like it. It's a nice change of pace, scenery, and it helps break up, because training camp ends after this week and we go into the preseason schedule. Like, it helps break that part up to where now it's like, all right, 2 weeks remaining before they cut down the roster. What does this thing actually look like? What are people saying? And you can kind of take the temperature of the team in ways that you don't necessarily get to when you're at the facility every single day.
As a fan of it, we all love when the training camp fights break out, unless Aaron Donald's involved. That's what I always say.
Gosh.
You don't want a training camp fight with Aaron Donald involved. That means a helmet's being swung at somebody.
Do you remember that from last year where it was like, oh man, are you going to suspend him? And it's like, no,
we're not going to suspend him. He's the face.
Myles Garrett, like for the Mason Rudolph crime that, him like whacking him with a helmet. How many game suspension was that?
He was gone. I think he finished the season suspended, and I think he had to serve a little bit in the next season.
I think it's because Aaron Donald didn't make contact, because if he did, he would have murdered somebody. Like, that's what you're worried about when these things get heated, which again is why I bring back the one that we saw last night, like the mini skirmish. I don't really read much into it. I honestly think it's like guys get tripped up and then it's, oh, you hit our quarterback, we're gonna rough you up now. Like, some of it's overblown, but it really does show you how I think that stuff's good in terms of like the team camaraderie element, and it's football, so you expect that stuff to happen. But there is, the Bears have been tame when it comes to that. Like, I'm not saying anything that they're soft or anything like that. I think the coaches would prefer it look like this, but it's not. It's kind of a non-issue with this team. Like,
my favorite thing is like I want to say it was Kelsey's podcast that he does with his brother. And he was like, I'll never understand it, but we all do it. It's the dumbest thing in the world. Why do we punch people with helmets on?
Oh, my God. I saw a linebacker. Actually, funny story, a little Bears tie in here. So in 2019, Avion Collins, who at that time, I think he was a second-year player out of TCU. So he was with the Vikings. He was like, trying to back up swing tackle role. And this guy, Devontae Downs, who was a 6th or 7th round linebacker from Cal, got into a scuffle, and Avion Collins is a massive individual. He's huge.
Yeah.
In games here for the Bears with the 2nd string and 3rd string offensive line. Devontae Downs punches him in the helmet, and guess what happens? He breaks his hand. Like, don't do that. Like, it's just common sense. Like, object meaning like immovable force. It's not going to end well. And I know that guys get heated and all of that, but like punch him in the stomach if you're going to do anything. Don't break your freaking hand for something that's like so benign. These scuffles end up dying down. Guys dap each other up. Everybody's good after a while. Like, don't set yourself back before the season even begins by trying to be all macho out there punching people with helmets on.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, I never understand it, but all football players are just like, I don't know. Like the fact that Kelsey was just like, I don't get it either, but like you got to. Like if somebody, like we just saw Travis Kelsey do that in camp this year. You know what I mean? So yeah. It's always dumb, but it's always listen. It's football. It is violent and it is entertaining, and we all.
Third quarter.
Let's keep this thing moving right along. Let's head into the third quarter. Appreciate you guys for showing love. Hit that like button, subscribe to the page. Make sure you drop a Bardon in the comments below. Courtney, we got a lot of questions on this team as far as guys who are backs against the wall or just kind of going through the motions in practice, I should say. Let's start it off here. Nate Davis. He didn't leave us feeling good. Our podcast on Tuesday, we both talked about kind of how, at the end of the day, you basically created more speculation than not. J-Mac said he didn't get a chance to put eyes on him. Did you see Nate Davis out there? We heard he was in pads.
I did.
Was he doing anything serious in pads, or was he kind of standing on the sideline?
So I saw him and there were some conflicting things because we all saw him warming up. He was in pads. That would have been his first time in pads with the Bears because he had 3 practices before yesterday. And it might have been for only a couple reps. I know that I saw him out there during some portion of team work, but Ja'Tari Carter was getting nearly all the 11-on-11 reps. So it's clear that Nate Davis is in this ramp up period. How long is it going to take? If he's not out there tonight, if this is still kind of the same limited work, then, I guess it's an encouraging sign that at least he's out there in pads. But, what is it going to take? And I'm curious to hear from Matt Eberflus about, what are those next steps? What does Nate Davis need to do to be able to get himself in there full time? Because they need him out there. And it's not that Ja'Tari Carter has done anything, to not make his case, that he will be he's doing a good job, all things considered. He was a late round draft pick. He's thrown into this. He's the 3rd string right guard. Lucas Patrick is still on ice right now, dealing with an injury. They're making the best of this that they can, but it would help to have Nate Davis in there. And the fact that he was back in pads leads you to believe that he's closer versus where he was last week to actually getting back.
Lucas Patrick is another name I wanted to bring up that I thought was interesting because we've all talked about this, your best ability is availability. Mm-hmm. Are we heading toward a point where Ja'Tari Carter could be our 2nd string right guard? He's played well enough to tell you that he can play the NFL game, but it doesn't feel like Lucas Patrick has a lot of longevity in being healthy right now.
It's tough because he didn't start off on the right foot last year with injuries at the beginning of camp. He comes back and he hurts himself again. He's out for the rest of the year after that Patriots game. like a lot of really bad injury luck. And sometimes there's nothing you can do about it as a player. Sometimes it's just the nature of the position you play puts yourself in a more vulnerable position where you get hurt. And so I feel bad for Lucas Patrick because they need, well, for him, he came here from Green Bay. It was his first like big-ish contract. He was an undrafted guy, I want to say. Like, I'm pretty sure he's an undrafted guy from Duke. Like he, worked his ass off to get a role in Green Bay. And then he gets the deal to come down here to join up with, he is undrafted. I was right on that. Like to come down here to work with Luke Getsy to, be the starting center on this team. And then the injuries happen. Like it's unlucky, but if these things persist, then Ja'Tyre Carter, when Nate Davis gets back, because at least we're seeing him in pads and he's on the path to doing that, Ja'Tyre Carter would be their second string right guard. And these reps are invaluable for someone like that because he's not going to get them if Nate Davis is healthy during the year. So he might as well get them now so he can, build off of that.
It's so crazy to be at that point, right? Where we were with Lucas Patrick a year ago. Mm-hmm. It felt like the Bears were building this offensive line for him to be kind of that veteran leadership, right? It was even to the point where we were like, well, I guess Cody Whitehair is just moving the heck out of the way. And this is going to be Lucas Patrick's offensive line. Now it feels like he's, especially seeing him at camp, how excited he was, how much energy he brought to that line. It just feels like he's on the outside looking in too often for me.
It's no fault of his own. I mean, the injuries happen, but if he doesn't get healthy, then that's a very realistic possibility.
Any concern that right now with some of the guys that still are not participating? Yesterday we had Jaquan Brisker, Chase Claypool, Tremaine Edmonds, Lucas Patrick, like we just talked about, Treston Ebner, Blackwell, Jamarquise Gates. Any concern on any of those names possibly lingering right now? Because we've seen some guys be out for a while now.
Yeah, and I think that like the thing they keep telling us about Tremaine Edmonds is that there's no question he'll be ready for week 1. So that leads you to think, okay, probably soft tissue injury. They're playing it smart August 17th versus what they're going to do during the game week. And I honestly think that that's probably the same thing with Chase Claypool. I would not be surprised if they slow play this with Claypool because we know that like hamstring injuries, especially with wide receivers, it's a thing that like you just don't want to have persist and keep coming back and nagging, and then it costs you more time. If he doesn't play the rest of the preseason, I would not be shocked. But that's just basing it on what I know about those sorts of injuries and how teams typically handle them. The one that somebody we haven't talked about that we're now seeing back for the first time is DeMarcus Walker. And I know what I said earlier was just kind of what Alan Williams said, that, he didn't notice him all that much, but he was out there. That's going to be good to watch, hopefully today, to get to see more action from him paired with Unique Ngakoue. What do those ends look like? Because we have seen the rotation and it will continue to be a rotation, but like, how are they going to use both of them? He hasn't played in a couple of weeks. So that'll be good to watch him get out there and, establish himself a little bit and what that pass rush can look like with it at full force, at full strength, rather like what it looks like with those two in there.
I think my only concern right now with Claypool is even today, right in the 1920 drive, again, check that out. A lot of good nuggets in there. If you guys haven't had a chance to look at that, especially on the offensive side from Justin Fields, that's on the Chicago Bears YouTube channel. I believe it's on their website as well, so tune in with that. But the thing, Darnell Mooney said this, and we saw it last season. My only concern with Claypool is, even though he's already built up this relationship, Darnell said, if you're not out there, Justin's not giving you the ball. Yeah. If you're not somebody that's working with him on a consistent basis, Justin is not giving you the ball. Now, a ton of work in the offseason with Claypool.
Predicated on trust. Like, this is the guy that you want. He's not going to just throw you open because you think you can get open.
Yeah.
That's a really important thing that you pointed out there, because Mooney's right. And there's a reason that he'll lock in sometimes. It feels like he's locking in on DJ Moore. He's locking in on Cole Kmet because he's built the most trust with those guys. He's built, a repertoire with them. And even with Mooney too. I mean, I remember when before Mooney was even back out there, he's like, I have no concern about that. You had enough time on task the last 2 seasons, but that could be a thing. You don't want it to develop into a thing, but that could be a thing with Chase Claypool. If he's not out there, how far behind the 8 ball are they when he is able to get back out there? Because that could limit his production in this offense. Because if Fields is a quarterback that has to trust what he sees before releasing the football, then you might not be a big part of the game plan. Because I mean, we saw it last year too. Like, they didn't have much time to work together in season. They're like Chase Claypool is learning the offense on the fly. Justin Fields still like growing through it. Yeah. And the result of that was a measly, 10, however many catches he had, because there just was not that trust factor built up between Fields and the guy who was supposed to be his go-to weapon. And so,
yeah, and we didn't see it with anyone last season outside of, at a certain point, it was just EQ and Darnell. When Darnell got hurt, it was like, all right, I got 7 passes for you, EQ. This is what you're getting. And that's our offense, right? And Cole Kmet. So I do believe that. And now, listen, they were able to get work in the offseason. They were able to get work in down in Florida before training camp, and they got in good work, I think, early on in training camp. But there is that, right, like, if he doesn't play at all in the preseason, how long is it going to be until we see Chase Claypool be a real part of this offense that Justin Fields trusts, right? Are we going to be week 2, week 3, week 4, right? Mm-hmm. Like, that's an impact for a guy who's in a contract year this season, and he talks about that.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's, again, like right now, I feel like the smart thing to do with anybody who has a nagging injury is to slow play it, to make sure that it's healed, so you're not like losing that time in season that's so precious and valuable. But the pressure's on Chase Claypool. Like, he knows that. I mean, I remember when he was talking about it earlier in the preseason, when he's like, well, if anybody's questioning my work ethic, they don't see what I'm doing behind the scenes. And what he's doing behind the scenes now will prove whether that's a true statement, because for him to be able to get back out there when he's healthy and to show there isn't much drop off, that's what is going to help, like, kind of win people over in the Chase Claypool camp versus, like kind of what it is right now, where it's still like, man, like there's all this potential, but he's not out there. Yeah. How is that going to hinder things going forward?
Surprisingly enough, he's not a social media wide receiver, as Justin Herbert was dubbed last year, being a social media quarterback, which he didn't do himself any favors by losing in the first round. That was a silent shot. I don't even know why I brought that one up, but I don't know, man. Justin Herbert continuing that Phillip Rivers legacy of heartbreaking losses in the last minute. Let's get into the fourth quarter here.
Fourth quarter.
As we want to talk about some standouts. Of course, we know DJ Moore, Justin Fields, those guys. But were there guys who, kind of you didn't know coming into camp if they were going to be a part of this team, if they were going to be a big part of this team, that we're seeing stand out in these joint practices? I know Micah Bakersfield was one that stood out in the preseason game. Have we seen some of those guys kind of continue into this joint practice?
That was somebody who I was going to bring up. He stood out last night. He picked off Gardner Minshew inside the low red zone during the second team units. We're going up against each other in that situation drill. And I think for somebody like that, undrafted linebacker out of LSU, I mean, you just don't hear about that many guys playing linebacker from LSU making it to the league. So good for him. And, right now there's an opportunity because Tremaine Edmonds, obviously he's your top linebacker of that unit, but he's out. So finding ways to crack this depth chart, could it be him and a DeMarcus Gates battling for a spot? I mean, DeMarcus is not playing right now, and I don't know how big of a position battle that would be for people to watch, but like, it's more just, hey, this guy's making plays, kind of like what we saw from Braylon Trahan back in the beginning part of training camp. And then he had, I think, a pick last week too. So seeing those things in training camp, like more like the lesser known side, I would say, again, I'm going to go back to Velus. For him to bounce back, he needed yesterday. Like, I remember walking away being like, good for him. Like, I bet he feels good right now, because the pass that he caught down the sideline with the second team offense during 11-on-11, and then the one that he caught inside the 5-yard line from Fields during that situation drill, like, that's good for him to build some confidence that, I'm not just a gadget play guy. I can still show off my speed in this offense, and hopefully for his sake, that he's proving to coaches that, he can still do a lot, because you haven't seen a whole ton from Dante Pettis, and like, that's his main competition for punt return. But how are they going to decide that final spot at receiver? You know, if he can show some more things in training camp, like he did yesterday, that's great, but they got to be able to trust him that it's not just like a flash in the pan and he's going to fumble the ball away. He fumbled 3 times last year and he muffed 2 punts. So like those are things that will cost you your job, no matter if you're a 3rd round pick or, you know, whatever. They're still giving him every opportunity to shine though. And I think that he probably felt pretty good by the time yesterday was over, that he was kind of able to flush what happened on Saturday and move past it.
Also wanted to hit on this. How's Darnell Mooney looking out there? Does he look like he's back in full form now at this point? Because we saw, of course, in the one-on-one drills, right? Like you can't take too much away from it. But the one thing that I do take away from it is it looks like his speed's pretty much back.
That's what I noticed. Like his speed looks like it's back. And this is somebody who had an ankle injury, you know, surgically repaired ankle that he was going to have anyways. He said he was planning to have the tightrope surgery on his left ankle and then he just happened to break it. So, you know, it worked out. It sucks, but it worked out, at least for what his plan was. And it's coming in and out of breaks and how fast he's able to, like what that burst looks like.
Yeah.
That I remember we were watching when he was doing some rehab work before he was up to doing full team reps during training camp earlier in August. So it does look like that's back with him. I think the timing between him and Fields last night was just a little off. But that's okay. I mean, again, like they'll get there. Like they have so much time on task together that that's really not the group that you worry about too much. But I do think that with Mooney and the health, like he's on the right track to being able to sustain that.
Of course, when we have Courtney on, we have to have our annual backup quarterback talk. I heard PJ Walker did not look good yet again. Did we see anything from Badgett that might be moving him up? Nothing crazy?
Nothing that stood out. I think that PJ Walker has had a rough camp. Like there's no denying that. And it's tough to see because they brought him in thinking, okay, this is a better fit behind Justin Fields. If Fields has to miss time, he's missed time his first 2 seasons. And right now you don't have a lot of confidence that if they had to go to him in games that it would look good. But I keep going back to that one throw he had yesterday. Like that was a nice redemption moment for him, but it's one throw, the one to Velus Jones. Yeah. So I do worry about the depth on this team and the depth at an important position. It doesn't look great right now, but how they end up splitting up those reps in the preseason. Maybe Tyson Bates, maybe he ends up getting more. I mean, they clearly like the kid. He was a D2 product who, caught on at the Super Bowl with Luke Getsy, and they brought him here for a reason. I remember thinking it was such a long shot that he was going to be even a part of the team in the time we saw him at the beginning of rookie minicamp. He's practice squad. Like there's no doubt in my mind that if they're going to keep somebody, I think he is a wonderful practice squad candidate for this team, that they would let Nathan Peterman, I don't think they'll keep 2 quarterbacks on the practice squad roster, but this week in theory could always blow open competition for any position. But as of right now, I mean, I'm real curious to see like what Matt Eberflus thinks about PJ Walker as a backup, because there's nothing that leads you to believe right now, yeah, this is a viable option. There's nothing. There really isn't. And, that's not a great sign.
And when you open up, I believe what I heard is he opened up practice pretty much the same way that he opened up his preseason game, with a deep shot over the middle of the end and an interception.
Yeah. It's just like, what are you seeing out there? Because, this guy is used to throwing to DJ Moore. And it could just be that he's not adjusting to the personnel that's in the game or in whatever situation in practice. But I don't think the Bears can be feeling pretty good about that one.
How do you think they're feeling with the wide receiver depth right now? Just in case, right, that Chase Claypool, isn't able to work his way in there. Do you think we're still feeling like that's one of the stronger units on this team?
It is. I mean, because DJ Moore can make up for things in a lot of different areas, and he's going to be such a huge part of this offense. Tyler Scott, if he can put together another couple like really, strong days of camp the way that we've seen. I know that he was a little down on himself for he had a decent preseason game against Tennessee. He was down on himself. I think he coughed up a ball early on, but and I talked to him afterwards. I think punt return for him is what he's really trying to zero in on. If he made an interesting comment. He's like, I'm not trying to be DJ Moore. And, for a rookie, it's like, man, you try to shoot for the stars and you've got this guy as an example, but it's also, hey, I'm a rookie. I'm trying to learn this offense. Like, don't put too much. I'm not going to put too much on my plate as I'm trying to do this for real. So, I think right now they're in a good spot. The Claypool thing is certainly one to keep an eye on, but you don't want to hit the panic button just yet because this could just be more precautionary than, like maybe shutting him down for the rest of the preseason is the way to go to make sure you can ensure that health.
Yeah, we'll see, man. We'll see. But hey, that's another edition of the Chicago Bears podcast. Hit that like button, subscribe to the page, drop a bear down, stop playing with us, leave a 5-star review over on the podcast platform, Spotify and or Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. We got anything else that you want to leave us with, Courtney, going into tonight's practice that you want to see?
I will say one of the coolest things that I've seen them do here for like everybody, media, fans, whatever, they have a PA announcer who announces like what the drills are, what period of practice we're going into, cool. What's next. Like the average fan doesn't know what some of these things are. And like, the really casual fans, like what's 11 on 11, what's 7 on 7, what's, what are these individual drills? So I really appreciate like the setup down here. I feel like a lot of teams can, learn from how the Colts are doing this and apply it to like what they do in training camp. I thought that was really neat yesterday to see that.
You don't want just the air horn to let us know, that we're going head into another drill and then just like.
I feel like I barely even hear it, but they have a good setup here for the fans to be able to know what is going on in training camp practice.
Hey, get on that, Bears. Come on now. We can do better. We're the charter franchise. Let's get this thing together. Hey, but that's another edition. Y'all stay safe out there. For Courtney Cronin, I'm Pat the Designer. We'll be back with more coverage tomorrow of joint practice and, of course, previewing the Colts game. It's a Bears Football Friday coming up. We'll see you guys then. Bear down. Peace.